Hello, everybody. I'm back here again with one more interesting poem. Hope you enjoyed my last video on Labelle Dame Sans Mercy. Today, I brought an American poem, in fact, a poem written by an American poet, Langston Hughes, Ballad of the Landlord. So, Langston Hughes is a very popular name in 1930s America and in the literature, who pioneered a particular literary movement called jazz poetry. So in one of his essays he says, we blacks or we negroes give expression to our black selves without fear or shame. If the white Americans accept, we feel glad. If they don't accept, it doesn't really matter. So this is how he started this movement, though it was also opposed by his own clan to some extent. Later, there was this realization. The criticism directed towards Langston was little, harsh, and he didn't deserve it. So he was, in fact, at the forefront of protest against such exploitation of blacks in America during 1930s. So this poem also raises its voice against such oppression of blacks by white Americans. Let's read and understand the poem. Landlord, landlord, my roof has sprung a leak. Don't you remember? I told you about it way last week. So the speaker is obviously a tenant, a black tenant. We'll understand that a black tenant talking to a white, of course, landlord, uh, who seems to be very passive in this poem. We'll also try to analyze why he is passive. It's as if a dramatic monologue. There is a speaker, also a passive listener. So this is addressed to a passive listener. What are his responses? We'll learn through the speaker's own words. So that is the feature of a dramatic monologue. To some extent, this poem fits the description of that dramatic monologue. So landlord, landlord, my roof has sprung a leak. This repetition of landlord, landlord sounds as if it's a nursery rhyme. So this is employed deliberately uh, to perhaps articulate some sort of sarcastic notion. So he's little satirical. I mean the poem, little ironical, critical of the owner's or the landlord's attitude towards the tenant. So he says, landlord, landlord, my roof has sprung a leak. It has developed a crack and it is leaking during rainy season. Don't you remember? I told you about it way last week. So I told you, and it's been a week since I complained of this problem, and nothing has been done so far. And that would be the general or attitude of landlords. And in those times too, they exercised this indifference. They exhibited this indifference towards the perhaps problems or sufferings of the tenants. They never bothered to perhaps help them. So it sets the tone of the of the entire poem here. The very first stanza: landlord, landlord, my roof has sprung a leak. Don't you remember? I told you about it way last week. And again, landlord, landlord. So this particular period in the history of America, 1930s, especially this Harlem, Renaissance, people, of course, were subjected to humiliation, exploitation, and suppression, but they were not really, at the receiving end wholeheartedly. They started protesting against it. They've already started protesting against it, though they knew the consequences that they will end up either in jail or facing some corporal punishment, and still they could do that. So this is all. Here is also a kind of rebellion which can be seen in the very way these things are presented, as if he is mocking the landlord's indifference, and he's attacking the entire society. We'll come to that, because though it is addressed to a landlord, this is against the very system, not about any particular landlord or person. So this is an attack on the very system, which has been very harsh and unfair, and also exploiting this particular community of blacks for their own selfish gains. So landlord, the steps is broken. The steps is broken down, and there seems to be a little grammatical error, and that is intentional. I'll tell you why. The subject verb agreement is not right. The steps is broken, he says, because the speaker who is talking here is not that educated. I mean, he's not an educated fellow, you can say. Maybe he had some schooling, but not a very sophisticated form of education that he could get. He was not that privileged to have complete education, perhaps, and also the life that he was exposed to, and to the harsh realities of life, and this is reflected in his very language, which sounds more colloquial, so rustic. So landlord, these steps is broken down. So steps are also broken down, and maybe is staying upstairs in the first floor of the building. Obviously, owner has to be, or landlord has to be staying downstairs in the ground floor. So while going up, he will always have this struggle, because the steps are broken. They are not in order. They are not proper. When you come up yourself, it's a wonder you don't fall down. So when does the owner come up? Maybe to collect the rent from the tenant, and it happens at least not more than once or twice in a month. But he has to deal with this difficulty every day, the tenant. So what's happening in this stanza? When you come up yourself, it's a wonder you don't fall down, because it's very difficult to come upstairs through these broken steps. Still you manage to do it. So that is pointing towards the hypocrisy of the owner, who just chooses to ignore the problem. If he himself has to say that there was so much of difficulty, or if he himself has to express the problem while going up, perhaps it would need repair, and he will have to repair it. So he willfully ignores the problems. So that's why he attacks that kind of mediocrity. When you come up yourself, it's a wonder you don't fall down, because every time I come up, I feel like falling down. I will always have the difficulty. Okay. Then there seems to be something happening. Maybe the owner got angry, and he was responding to it, and he said something, or he murmured something. As I said, even the response of the owner is also learned through the speaker himself. Now he says, $10 you say I owe you? I owe you $10? You mean I have to pay you $10? Bucks means money, could be dollars here. $10 you say is due. $10 you say is due. Bucks, as I told you, is a colloquial expression. That is why it just reflects the kind of living or the culture that this man is exposed to, the tenant. So $10 you say is due. Well, that is $10 more. And I'll pay you $10 more till you fix this up. House up new. Only on a condition, if you could fix this up, if you could repair maybe the leaking roof and broken stairs, if you set them right, if you fix these problems, I'll pay you $10 more. And that is some sort of insolence on this, on the part of the tenant. That is why I told you, at this point of time in the history, these people, blacks, are not that submissive. They have started rebelling against the very system. So no matter what, and that was a true reflection of this attitude, which I just quoted in the beginning of the story, when Langston says in his essay that we Negroes choose to express our black selves without fear or shame. So this is the attitude. What? Now again, he could have said something else. He says, what did he say? You gonna get eviction order. Say again, going to. So that is another colloquial expression. You gonna get eviction orders. So you mean to say that you will get a court order to throw me out of the house? Okay, you gonna cut off my heat. And don't look at the explanation given in this text for this cut off the heat, because I don't think they've got it right. They just says heater that keeps a person warm during water. It's not about the heater. I think it is about the electricity. So I'll cut the electricity connection. I'll keep you in dark and you will have to suffer. So maybe that is the owner's attitude. He's just guessing. Oh, you mean to say that you gonna cut off my heat? You gonna disconnect this electricity supply to my house? You gonna take my furniture and throw it out in the street? You mean to say that you will take out my furniture and throw them out in the street? So this makes it clear he's not just addressing a person, as I felt in the beginning of the story. So it is against the system, very system. He's addressing the system, corrupt, rotten system. So these are the usual norms and usual ways of landlords dealing with the tenant. This is how they threaten a tenant by saying that I will throw your furniture out, I'll get the order from the court and get you evicted from my place, or I'll just cut off all the facility like water and electricity. You're going to do all that, he says. Kind of onomatopoeia, what you call in stylistic. So a sound represented through words. Okay, you go on. Okay, do it. Something like that. Maybe he's nodding his head. That is why it is there. You talking high and mighty. Again, grammar as I said. You talking high and mighty as if you are powerful. You can do anything and still get away with it. Is this your attitude? Okay, go on. Talk on, he says. Talk on. There is a pause. Maybe he's chattering his teeth and controlling his anger, suppressing his anger till you get through. Okay, complete. Whatever you want to say, say it all. Tell it, at my face once for all. Just complete it. Just go on. Okay, tell me anything you want, because I am just determined to do what should be done. That seems to be the attitude. He says, okay, you ain't going. Okay, he says now, you ain't gonna be able to say a word if I land my fist on you. That is why he said he's not afraid. He's not that submissive. He's prepared for the consequences. The tenant, he says, if I land my fist on your face, you will not be able to say or utter a single word. I'll smash your face. I'll punch your face, punch your nose. So he's also becoming, aggressive. So that is the fullest expression of his rebellion and aggressive, attitude. You ain't going to be able to say a word. You will not be able to say a word if I land my fist on you. Now what happens? Police, come and get this man. He's trying to ruin the government and overturn the land. Observe, this stanza is in italics, which means it just echoes the attitude of the society towards the tenant. It is not the words of the landlord alone. And also observe the language. It is little formal and refined compared to the colloquial language of the tenant, which means there are some set of norms. This is what called institutionalized racism. So they have framed laws to protect the interests of white people in America, and they have declared through some certain law that these blacks are an inferior race. So this is why they have been put in italics, police, and also to say what will happen next naturally, and this would be the thing. This would be the event taking place everywhere in such circumstances. Police. He calls out police, and come and get this man. He says as if he has committed some unpardonable sin or crime. He's trying to ruin the government. So there is an exaggeration, and the very law, of course, is framed to convict a person or frame a person on serious charges, not just an abusive kind of a fellow who just lost his temper against a person. Is not a small crime. They want to exaggerate it, so he will be charged on serious counts. He is trying to ruin the government. He is against the very system, government. This kind of fellow tenant like him overturn the land. He is just breaking the laws of this land, and such a a fellow is a liability or a blemish to this very society. That kind of serious tone is just sounded through these lines. Then what happens? Corpus whistle. So curtailed expressions. Now there are no sentences. Corpus whistle, because this is what bound to happen. People, corpus whistle, naturally the police come blowing their corpus whistle. Whistles are made of corpus in those days, and that was a typical sound produced by the police to just announce their arrival. So corpus whistle, yeah, it happened, which means they came. Patrol bell, police patrolling. The bell of today's siren or the other sounds, in those days patrolling bell, which means as if the police in huge number arrived, as if they are nabbing a terrorist, a man who has committed a serious crime. So such is the kind of magnanimity being exaggerated of this situation. Patrol bell. Then what happened? Arrest. So you need to just observe the curtailed expressions. They are not the full sentences, because these are neither said by the tenant nor by the landlord, but just indicating the very rotten system which could perhaps treat a tenant devoid of all emotions or humanity. Arrest happens. Precinct station, that was the kind of legal jurisdiction of this area. Precinct station, he was taken to precinct station. Iron cell. It could be inside the station itself, or it might suggest that he was just sent to the jail, and without, remember, there is no clarity whether he faced a trial in court. So he was sent to jail. Maybe it did, we'll see. Then headlines in press tomorrow. What appeared in newspapers? Man threatens landlord. Tenant held no bail. Judge gives Negro 90 days in county jail. Now we learn at the very last line of this poem that he's a Negro. That was also made clear, very much clear through his own language, colloquial expressions and all, that he was a Negro. So this could be from 3 different newspapers, these headlines, or could be in one paper, and that doesn't really make any difference. It just read like man threatens landlord. The emphasis is on somebody threatening a landlord is not simply acceptable in this aristocratic society or some American society. Tenant held no bail. That was the focus, and he was denied bail. Judge just gives Negro 90 days in county jail. Maybe there are jails in urban region also. In county jails were perhaps built only for the convicts like these Negroes, who will be furthermore will be subjected to furthermore kind of physical torture or a harsh punishment, corporal punishments by asking them to do some laborious jobs in jail. So that is why maybe it is county jail. So judge gives Negro 90 days for voicing against the landlord. If in order to understand what kind of protest is this, it also just reminds me of one more poem by Hol Soyinka, who is also a Negro. So a telephone conversation, I think that is the poem. That conversation was also between tenant and landlord. In fact, landlady there. He's a prospective tenant. He has not still got the house for rent. He has inquired after going through an advertisement. He just inquires whether that house is still available. That landlady, the very first question she asks, he's about his race. He says, "I'm a West African." In fact, he himself voluntarily admits, because he says, I hate a wasted journey, madam, because after everything, if I come over there, when you look at me and say that you are a Negro, that I will not be giving my house, so that will waste my time. So I don't want a wasted journey on my part. I'm a West African, he says. And then the very next question she puts is, how black? Now he through the entire poem he goes on describing how black through different images. He says West African, sepia, some kind of black, and other such things, brunette, and different shades of black, dark brown or reddish brown, all that thing. And at the end of the poem he just gets frustrated because she was not convinced. She goes on probing more and more. Then he says, madam, of course, looking at my face, I am a brunette. I mean, that is the color of my face is brunette, little reddish brown. But you have to see rest of my body, rest of the parts of my body. And then he gets angry and goes on describing everything in detail. Then at the end of the poem he says, madam, constant sitting has turned my bottom raven black. Why don't you come and see yourself? So such is the kind of anger that these people have, these Negroes have harbored in their heart against inhuman and indifferent society they lived in. Thank you so much.